Back in it. I know I keep saying this, but this will probably be my last gaming stream for a while. So we're gonna play. We're gonna try to do as much as we can, conquer as much of this little fake world as we can tonight, and listen to some Doug Wilson, Pastor Doug Wilson, internet celebrity Doug Wilson, based Doug Wilson. I got some videos lined up, queued up to hear him out, listen to him. Plus, I just want to catch up on what he's talking about. And maybe after that, we'll watch some debates, some political debates, and switch things up. We'll see. We'll see how long this stream goes. I think I got 3 or 4 hours of Doug Wilson, two to 3.5 hours. And if we stream longer than that, then we'll either chat or we'll listen to some other debate stuff. Unless people want to suggest other things or listen to other things instead. But this first one is not. This first one is Voddie Baucham talking about mega churches. We're going to listen to that, and then it's going to get into Doug Wilson. These first two videos are from Reformed Wiki 2.0. They're pretty good. Pretty good. They basically just talk about pastors in the good sense and the bad sense. Call out the bad ones, hype up the good ones. So we're gonna watch 2 of those videos, and then we're gonna get into just some Doug Wilson, clips from his podcast, excerpts, rants he's gone on, speeches he's given, just a mixture of different videos and stuff. It's not like an actual sermon or sermon series or anything.
If you use
and
these
I'm
to
going to
remove
conquer
earwax,
this
get rid of them
tiny
right
little
now.
continent.
There's even a warning on the box telling you not to...
About continuing this process of entertaining and attracting more and more people. What is everything about? Everything is about entertainment. Everything is about numbers. What is the ministry? Well, this is about continuing this process of entertaining and attracting more and more people.
There are more mega churches today than ever before. Not all mega churches are bad, but it does seem like there are major problems with the vast majority of mega churches.
Because God broke the law for love. That when we share our hope with other
Stephen
people, what we
Furtick.
have to offer people is exactly what everyone is looking for.
Why are mega churches so successful? And why are so many of them lacking in solid biblical teaching? The key is that many of these churches prioritize success and numbers above teaching all that the Bible teaches.
And over 500 people have given their lives to Jesus for the first time in this church in the last 5 months. That's over 100 per month.
To achieve success and numbers, mega churches often emphasize entertainment.
I'm praying about whether to follow through on this illustration. And I hear the Lord say, yes!
And keeping people happy.
I am blessed, prosperous.
And avoid teaching the uncomfortable or controversial parts of the Bible.
Because we try to be like Jesus. Very rarely did Jesus ever talk about morality or social issues.
They focus on exciting, emotional music that creates an environment where people can feel spiritual without ever really committing themselves to the Bible's commands.
I mean, if the beat is right and the band is hot, I can sing all kind of lies and feel like I've met with God.
According to Voddie Baucham, most churches today have moved away from hymnody and liturgy, which emphasize biblical truth.
I believe there are a number of tools that God gives us. And I think it's interesting that many of these tools we've either redefined or moved away from altogether. These tools that remind us that we are a community that is defined by this pattern of sound words. Things like hymnody and liturgy. Hymnody and liturgy. We've moved away from both hymnody and liturgy. But hymnody and liturgy, it's not just a question of style, and that's not what I'm talking about here. I'm not talking about a question of style. I'm talking about a question of content. The idea that when we gather together week to week, we are not here just to entertain one another. We are not here just to get a spiritual jolt or a shot in the arm. We are here to have our minds renewed, as we just heard earlier, and we are here to be rooted and grounded in these things most surely believed among us. And what hymnody does and what liturgy does is it says to us, these are those truths that we need to hear again and again and again. They define us.
What's going on,
The
Sad?
purpose of church is not to entertain,
Hope all is well.
but rather to teach all
Spent
that
the day
Bible
moving.
teaches.
4 bears
And I'm
help.
afraid that so often when we gather,
Retaria.
what we're saying is it
Retaria.
has to be new.
That's awesome.
It has to be fresh. It has to be
Hope
entertaining.
everything worked out pretty well.
It has to scratch itching ears.
Mad progress.
Some
Still a lot to
argue
move,
that
but
this
big
kind
progress.
of
Yeah.
approach to church results
Step
in
by
dead
step, slowly but
orthodoxy.
surely. Just keep
But
stepping in that
nothing
right
could be
direction,
further
you know.
from the truth.
You know.
And I am not talking here about dead orthodoxy. Going through the motions.
That's awesome.
Amen? Far from it.
Yeah, we're definitely gonna have to come visit sometime.
This is not about style. It's about substance.
Most megachurches lack a written confession, which clearly states exactly what the church believes.
I've said it before, I'll say it again. Confessionalism. Our confessions remind us of what it is that we believe.
Instead, these
Yeah, you
megachurches
gotta
have
replenish with the
unwritten
beef.
confessions, or very short statements of faith that essentially depend upon the personal beliefs of whoever is leading the church at the time.
It makes
So it's not a sin in your church to have an abortion?
That's the kind of conversation we would have, finding out your story, where you're from, what
Work
you
through
believe.
it, like talk
Yeah,
about
I
things.
mean, God's the judge. People have to live to their own convictions, and I think if I have to tell you,
And when one leader leaves or steps down, the next leader who steps up might have significantly different beliefs than the previous leader.
And there's not this divide, by the way, in Christianity between churches and ministries who have confessions and churches and ministries who don't. As one writer has put it, the difference is between churches and ministries who have written confessions that are available to be evaluated by all, and those who
I think
have
that was that guy that got
unwritten
outed for
confessions
cheating on his
that
wife.
change
The
from
New
time
York
to time.
pastor,
But
Justin
we're all
Bieber's
confessional.
pastor or whatever.
We're all
Which would make
confessional.
sense, right? Someone with weak
It's just,
theology like
is the
that.
confession
Being a
written?
weak man.
Is it there to be evaluated? Is it there for all of us to see so that there can be accountability? Or is the confession just in the mind of the minister so that if he leaves and goes somewhere or dies, now the next minister brings the confession that's in his mind, and you have division in the church when he says something one day that goes against the confession of the last guy that wasn't written, by the way, so he didn't know it, and now there's a war in the church between the unwritten confession of the last guy and the unwritten confession of the new guy, and nobody knows where the starting point is.
Without a written confession or an
You're not a dish. You're a man. Most name
That's
brand
my buddy
bars and
again.
body washes you
Let you
rub
know
on
this
your
guy,
skin
Jeremy.
are
He's
classified
the,
by the FDA as synthetic.
Dr. Squatch commercial guy.
written confession or an
It's actually like a really
emphasis
good dude.
upon biblical teaching, megachurches end up focusing on worldly metrics of success, such as numbers, and they make it their goal to increase numbers rather than to faithfully teach all that the Bible teaches.
So what does the ministry mean if you
All right,
don't
we
have
got infrastructure
a theology?
built up. We got 4
What does the
pretty,
ministry
pretty
mean if you don't have a confessional framework?
set and secured
What are
cities.
you being called to? What are you
Got that.
being called
Getting the
to
happiness
do?
in check, getting
If you
the
don't have
money in
this
check.
theological
Now it's time to
framework,
build an army and start playing defense.
If If we no longer have hymnody, we no longer have liturgy, we gather together to entertain people, we gather together in order to make sure that the crowd continues to grow and that people remain happy. Now we have the next generation growing up in the church, watching us do what we do. What is everything about? Everything is about entertainment. Everything is about numbers.
He's coming at some point.
What is the ministry? Well, this is about continuing this process of entertaining and attracting more and more people.
This oftentimes even results in these churches teaching things that are egregiously unbiblical.
And the process of discipleship is not God changing you into something else. It's Him revealing
Stephen Furtick,
who you've been all along.
The wolf in sheep's clothing.
However, since these teachings align with ideas that are popular in the world,
He's coming too.
culture,
So I got him on him in the south is coming for me for
churches,
sure.
Pastors,
And him in the
and
north
teachers,
is coming for me for sure.
because these kinds of churches
just sitting right
make
in the middle
people
of that.
feel good about themselves and enable them to
So I
ignore
gotta
the
pretty
problem
quickly
of
build
sin,
up an army here.
judgment, and hell.
And you hear people say, you don't preach enough about sin. You don't preach enough about repentance. But you know, I actually think what they're saying is you don't beat people up enough. You don't have to remind people they're sinners. They know.
No, they don't.
You don't have to remind people they fall short not only of God.
There's one
but
thing people in
who they would
America
want to be
today
themselves.
don't understand is that
You don't
they're
have to
sinners.
beat people up.
This is how megachurches
And you're not beating them up by
are
telling them the
leading
truth about
millions who
themselves.
attend them straight to hell.
It's actually the opposite. You're almost beating them up. You're letting them suffer and die by not telling them that they're sinners. By not telling them that they need salvation. That they are destined to go to hell if they don't change their ways, you know? That's cool. You look at someone who's a sinner and you're just like, whatever. I don't want to beat you up. I'll just let you coast on into hell for eternity, you know? That's wicked.
Well,
That's cruel.
John MacArthur is nothing compared to Douglas Wilson, whereas MacArthur is generally accepted.
So let's hear this. This is so sad. If you're coming in late, anyone coming in tuning in late, I have like a big playlist of Doug Wilson things. That last video was not, but this page, Reformed Wiki, which is usually pretty good. They're usually pretty good about calling out false teachers and then promoting good pastors. I disagree with some of their theology, but pretty much agree with most of it. They're like, Reformed Wiki. They're like Reformed Protestants, right? They believe in they're pretty much Calvinists with a little bit of a variation to it. But at the end of the day, they're just Scripture. It's just what does Scripture say, you know? So I think they kind of cross over denominations. It's not a specific denomination. It's more just like they evaluate the individual and what they're saying and how it compares to Scripture and how it compares to the Bible. You know, sola scriptura. Those kind of folks, and they lean definitely more towards like the Calvinist predestination kind of vibe. But you know, they always talk very well about like Voddie Baucham, who I love, Paul Washer, who I love and respect. There's some guys they promoted that I'm like, I don't really like them. Like the guy from Acts 29, I can't think of his name. I think he's weak and soft and pretty crazy sometimes with some of the stuff he believes. But I would assume they like Doug Wilson. Like Doug Wilson's pretty based. I don't know if he's like, he probably doesn't vibe with them too much on the Calvinism thing. He might. I don't know. I actually don't know an extremely lot about Doug Wilson and his philosophy, but from what I've seen, he's just like pretty based. Keep it real. What does the Bible say? Let's dive into this. Prove me wrong. Doug Wilson's just pretty good about like, prove me wrong if I'm wrong, but here's what the Bible says. Here's how it clearly should be interpreted. But this video is, what is it called? Why Everyone Hates Doug Wilson. So it could be one of two ways. It could be like, let's explain what the haters are talking about, right? Let's talk about why the haters hate on Doug Wilson. Or it could be about basically, because it says canceled. It says basically like on the little picture that like he's being canceled. So I don't know. I'm assuming this is them kind of talking about the haters of Doug Wilson and probably going to defend him, but it also could be them hating on him as well. So let's hear this out and see this. And then after that, it's just going to be a bunch of other Doug Wilson sermons and clips and snippets and rants kind of lined up.
John MacArthur is nothing compared to Douglas Wilson. Whereas MacArthur is generally accepted as an orthodox Christian leader, Wilson is far more controversial and complicated. Wilson is a pastor at Christ Church in Moscow, Idaho, faculty member of New St. Andrews College, and an author and speaker. Wilson was also featured in the movie Collision, which documented his debates with popular atheist Christopher Hitchens. Like MacArthur, Wilson holds to Calvinist theology.
If an unregenerate man is walking around in a liquor store deciding how he's going to get drunk that night, he's exercising his creaturely liberty. He is free to choose vodka or gin or bourbon or another liquor store. This is the left-right kind of liberty. What he is not free to do is to choose righteousness. Whatever he decides to do apart from Christ, it will be sinful. Even if he decides not to get drunk that night, apart from Christ, his decision will be a self-righteous one. He does not have any moral freedom unless and until Christ saves him. The doctrine of God's sovereignty has to be understood at both of these levels. When it comes to creaturely liberty, part of our quote-unquote Calvinism is to insist that God's sovereignty is fully consistent with our freedom as responsible agents.
Complementarianism, or the teaching that God created men to lead in the church and in the home.
Paul teaches us that the older women in the church are supposed to instruct the younger women a number of things. Among the things he includes in the curriculum is the lesson on how to be obedient to husbands. Quote, that they may teach the young women to be sober, to love their husbands, to love their children, to be discreet, chaste, keepers at home, good, obedient to their own husbands, that the word of God be not blasphemed. Titus 2, 4 and 5. But now, in this enlightened era, we teach the younger women to reach for their dreams, to follow their heart, and to not let anybody tell them what to do.
The sinfulness of homosexuality.
In this first talk, I want to talk about the real sin of Sodom. What Sodom's real problem was. What could possibly be meant by that phrase, the real sin of Sodom? Isn't it obvious? The sin of homosexual behavior draws its name from Sodom, draws its name from that city. What could be more obvious? And shouldn't we be suspicious of any attempt to draw our attention elsewhere?
The danger of critical race theory.
If someone says, well, I'm for social justice because I'm for justice, well, that's way too simplistic, because you have to ask what particular worldview is being advanced by the people who use the term social justice.
And the position that the government becomes tyrannical when it seeks to prevent Christians from gathering together in person for worship.
When I obey the Constitution and disobey a decree from some functionary who's not in his lane, the person who tells me to obey is not obeying Romans 13. And I am
China's
obeying Romans 13.
These are
Like on the other side of the
all
map.
controversial positions, but they are also all pretty well accepted within conservative Christianity.
They just declared war on me and Alexander for no reason at all.
Wilson more hated
Like he's way over
than
here.
any other Christian leader in the United States.
He's probably paying them or bribing them.
Wilson has written a defense of
All
the
right.
South during the time of
And
slavery.
so it begins.
Second, Wilson has
This game is going to be a lot of
theology
war, by
that
the
many
way.
argue is heretical.
A lot of early
Wilson
war.
co-authored a pamphlet with Steve Wilkins titled Southern Slavery as It Was, which condemned racism. It said that the slavery practiced in the South was unbiblical, but which also presented the South in a far more positive light than most people would agree with. Wilson has responded to criticism against his views, saying, "My defense of the South does not make me a racist. I am not interested in defending slavery. I don't believe we should practice slavery. What I said is that a Christian man in the South could be a slave owner. He needed to follow the rules in the New Testament. The whole debate about Southern slavery was whether 600,000 people should have been killed in a war to end the practice. With an atrocity such as the Holocaust, I believe war was a moral necessity. I don't believe Nazi Germany and the South were the same evil. What's my conclusion about Wilson's view of Southern slavery? Two things. First, I disagree strongly with Wilson about the nature of Southern chattel slavery. I think it was simply evil, that it was a completely different kind of slavery than the kind of slavery that the New Testament regulates, and that there is absolutely no justification for Southern chattel slavery. Second, I don't think Wilson is a racist, or that Wilson's views of Southern slavery disqualifies him as a Christian teacher. Wilson never argued anything that was racist, and Wilson did argue that Christians should have pursued an end to slavery. For me, a much more serious concern is Wilson's theology. Wilson used to be categorized with the Federal Vision movement.
Yep, there we go.
Although now he has distanced himself from the term. Patrick Hines,
he's got a little
the
army on him.
Presbyterian pastor, criticizes
All right.
Wilson's teachings concerning justification. I think Hines has one of the clearest and strongest criticisms against Wilson's theology.
Well, it's good that he's going after the city-state that I'm allied with and not seeing. At least yet.
Wilson argues a similar position, similar to Norman Shepherd. While he says that justified persons are secure in their position within the family of God, he adds the qualification. Always listen for that. Gotta listen for the but and the qualifications. He adds the qualification that, quote, men fall away because their salvation was contingent upon continued covenant faithfulness in the gospel, end quote. Now, that's quotation from Reformed is not enough. Okay, now, you're taking it out of context. Just listen. Let's see if we can find it here. Let me read the whole paragraph for you so there won't be any flack for that. Listen. But this relates to perseverance, backsliding, and apostasy. His providence determines that all things will come to pass, the end is known and cannot be judged. But the same providence also knows what will happen causally the moment before. God oversees the end, but also the means. And his providence of the means is fully consistent with the nature of secondary causes. Some things happen necessarily, like a rock tumbling in an avalanche. Other things happen freely, as when a man chooses to go left instead of right. Other things happen contingently, as when one thing depends upon another. Corey Saraya notes the importance of this in questions of apostasy. Quote, this does not mean that God is surprised by our actions, by no means. It means that this is how we see things played out in the providential fulfilling of the decrees of God. The means by which men apostatize from the covenant is unfaithfulness. The means by which men persevere in the covenant is faithfulness, end quote. In other words, to assert that men fall away because, excuse me, let me make sure I word this right. In other words, to assert that men fall away because their salvation was contingent upon continued faithfulness in the gospel is not to deny the sovereignty of God at all. So what's he asserting? And that's close quotation. What's he asserting? Men fall away from the gospel by not continuing in faithfulness. Okay, their salvation is contingent upon their covenant faithfulness. Okay, now listen to what it goes on to say here in the RPC US report. Make sure I pick up in the right place here. By making salvation contingent upon the covenant faithfulness of a believer, he has made salvation contingent upon a personal quality in or a state of being of the believer. This is the simple meaning of the suffix ness in faithfulness. In doing so, Wilson has shifted the means by which we appropriate the work of Christ from the exercise of faith to a change in the quality of one's character. This can be understood in no other way than salvation being contingent on something in or of a person other than Christ. That's exactly right. Okay, our salvation is not contingent upon our works, upon our fruit, upon our covenant faithfulness, or anything like that. Our salvation is secured by Jesus Christ alone, and it's always secured by Jesus Christ alone. And we receive that by belief alone, not by working.
In contrast to Hines, James White believes Wilson is within the realm of orthodoxy. White has interviewed Wilson to seek to clarify exactly what Wilson believes.
The primary thing, the primary focus of that is always going back to the issue of the federal vision.
Right.
And specifically R. Scott Clark's criticisms and the repetition of those criticisms ad nauseum over and over again.
The trolls come out, and one of the things they say over and over and over is federal vision, he denies justification by faith alone. But I don't deny justification by faith alone. I affirm it stoutly from beginning to end. I don't deny the imputation of the active obedience of Christ. I don't deny the imputation of the passive obedience of Christ as a forensic act that God performs at the point of an individual's true conversion. That happens, and I've maintained that now, maintained it all the way through.
Where do I stand concerning Wilson's theology? To be honest, I'm conflicted. On the one hand, I respect and trust James White. White has a personal relationship with Wilson. If White believes Wilson is within the realm of orthodoxy, I'm inclined to trust White's judgment. At the same time, Hines's arguments are also very compelling. What's my conclusion about Douglas Wilson in general? I certainly have significant concerns about Wilson's theology, as well as about his view of Southern chattel slavery. At the same time, like with MacArthur, I see Wilson as a fearless man who does not let cultural or governmental pressure silence him. He fights for many things I am fully aligned with, and he does so articulately, effectively, and boldly. I believe we need more Christians with Wilson's fighting spirit and fearlessness. Of course, it would certainly be better if their theology wasn't so controversial.
And one of the things that is assigned to us in the creation order is that when it comes to the consequences of the sexual act, women are betting with far more money than the men are. This is because they are the ones who get pregnant. Dear Dawson, I'm glad that I appear to be getting at the crux of your questions. What I wanted to do in this letter is discuss equity and equality and how we are to understand those words when it comes to life between the sexes. Egalitarianism has been a true intellectual corruption, and it is the kind of corruption that has gotten into everything. It worked its way into our collective heart in the form of envy, and worked its way out in our collective mind in the form of what is called equality. It has even crept, largely unnoticed, into the assumptions of many conservative believers. So we have to be careful working through this. There are layers. Biblical equity means that we are to apply the same standard to all, whether Jew or Greek, slave or free, male or female. At this first layer, we do this because we want to get the same equitable result. When someone is charged with a crime, for example, we require 2 or 3 witnesses for a conviction. We do this because if someone is charged with shoplifting, say, whether it is a man or a woman, we want the same rules applied, and we want the same results as a consequence of applying those same rules. We want the guilty man or woman to be convicted, and we want the innocent man or woman to be acquitted. We want the same rules so that we can get the same results. We want equity in the application of the rules, and we want equity in the results. That is the first layer, and it is pretty straightforward. That would be equity. But the next layer is a bit different. Here we want the same rules for all, knowing that it will wind up with completely different results. This is equity also, but it results in inequality of result. But even though there's inequality of result, there's no inequity. If we were to have a foot race and we included men and women both, and we applied the same standards to all, the consequence would be that the men would win a disproportionate number of the races. This, even though they had all had the same starting line, the same starting pistol, the same stopwatch, and the same finish line. If you treat them all the same, in this scenario, the results will be completely different. Inequality, but no inequity. Because of the obvious physiological differences between men and women, this is why, up until 10 minutes ago, we had men competing against men in their own divisions and women competing against women. This is why we rightly had men's sports and women's sports, and why the tranny thing is so screaming ridiculous. It is ridiculous because we are applying level 1 standards to a level 2
So
situation.
screaming ridiculous.
But the necessity of inequality principle still stands, even within those different divisions. Equality of opportunity here results in disparate outcomes. Not everyone gets the gold medal. Only one woman wins that medal, and in his division, only one man. Not everyone establishes a world record. Not everyone runs the same speed. There is inequality in the outcome, but no inequity in the rules of the competition. But please note, these will be different outcomes when you apply equitable rules to men and women when those men and women are all doing the same thing, laboring to achieve the same goal, which is getting to the finish line first. But sex is completely different. Men and women are both sexual beings, but their sexuality is completely different. A man and a woman running the 100-yard dash, running shoulder to shoulder, are doing the same thing differently. But when it comes to a man and a woman in an erotic relationship, face to face, they are doing completely different things. He's making love to a woman, and she is not. She is making love to a man, and he is not. They are both making love, but as individuals, they are not doing the same thing at all. And the difference is not to be found in the fact that they're giving one another pleasure, unlike a foot race. If they were to exchange foot rubs or scratch an itch between one another's shoulder blades, they would be giving the same pleasure to one another because in those respects their bodies are very much alike. Sore feet are sore feet. But with regard to sex, their bodies are completely different. So sex is therefore in a different category entirely. The same thing, a lovemaking session, is the result of two different people with different bodies, with different desires, different motives, different emotions, and different purposes, doing very different things. He receives by giving and she gives by receiving, and yet they both give and both receive, but differently. I once wrote something on this topic that caused a great deal of outrage and consternation, but I will go ahead and say it again. It caused that outrage because egalitarianism is such a capricious goddess and is very easily displeased. But sex is not an egalitarian pleasuring party. Sex is nothing like a foot rub. And this is where the egalitarianism has crept into many of our assumptions, even among conservatives. We have been repeatedly told that women are as interested in sex as men are, and the problem is that this is almost completely false. Notice that I say almost. It is not as though he is playing chess and she's in another room playing Scrabble. Of course, in one sense, they are doing the same thing, and both are interested in the same thing, but that is not what we really need to be reminded of. A woman can be as interested in sex as a man, but the nature of her interest is completely different. We need to be reminded of how different it is for both, because we've been subjected to unrelenting propaganda that stoutly maintains that apart from the minor concave-convex part, men and women approach sex in the same way. This is simply a lie. Furthermore, it is the lie that undergirds the whole transsexual debacle. The undeniable physiological difference between men and women is, for dogmatic reasons, regarded as a detail addressable via surgery, and all that is needed is for a person to decide what sex they are going to be, like deciding what you're going to major in college. But it is nothing like that at all. Now, I know that I'm describing a man and a woman in a sexual relationship, which is not your situation right now. But you would certainly like it to be your situation, and what I'm saying here is going to be relevant to how you might be enabled to get to that point. So please bear with me. The interest that men have in sex and the interest that women have in sex are interests that bear very little resemblance to one another. It is true that we could say that the phrase water flowing is a descriptive phrase, but keep in mind that this could include a narrow waterfall crashing onto rocks 1,000 feet below, and it could also apply to the Mississippi River, a mile wide, rolling onto the sea. In both cases, water is flowing, but the differences are more obvious than the similarities. A man's sexual cycle runs from arousal to climax. A woman's sexual cycle runs from arousal to when the kid graduates from college. He is the narrow waterfall, and she is the Mississippi. A man's sexual interest is very intense while it lasts and very much on the surface. A woman's sexual interest is broad and deep. A man's sexual focus is largely limited to one part of his body and is almost incidental to him. A woman's sexual focus involves almost her whole body. And to come to the most crucial point, the sex act is an act of biological reproduction, and the woman is the one who gets pregnant. This is the key to understanding everything, and it is why our current elites are so bent on persuading us, contrary to creation, reason, good order, common sense, and Holy Scripture, that men can get pregnant too. And all of this together means that while the man and the woman have a point of connection in having had sex together, their experience of the whole thing remains very different. Their attitudes toward the whole enterprise are not the same. Moreover, they cannot be the same. This is another way of saying that when it comes to the experience of sex, men and women do not share the same worldview. Of course, if they are both Christians, they can take a step back and share the same biblical worldview about sex, knowing what Scripture teaches about sex roles and so on. But with regard to the experience of sex, men don't understand women, and women don't understand men. This is not a flaw in the design. It is a feature, not a bug. We are not supposed to understand each other. The reason men and women feel so differently about it is because it is different. Remember what I said in the previous letter about this being designed. It is not a flaw. It is not a blind evolutionary adaptation. It is a creation feature marred by sin, which we will get to in a minute. Both men and women have testosterone in their bodies, and testosterone is a major factor when it comes to their libido for men and women both. A woman's ovaries make testosterone, and a man's testes make testosterone. So everything is the same, right? The difference is that an average man has about 15 to 20 times the amount of testosterone sloshing around in his body as an average woman does. This has an impact on things, on how the world appears to each of them. It means that his outlook is very different than her outlook. Okay, so how is all this relevant? And what difference does it make to you? According to a cluster of old myths, the seer Tiresias once displeased Hera and was turned into a woman for 7 years as a consequence. Later on, he was struck blind by her because Zeus and Hera were having an argument about whether men or women enjoyed sex more. Since Tiresias had been both a man and a woman, he was called upon to settle the question.
I could care less about that city
He said
and them
that,
taking
quote,
it. I just
of 10
wanted them to
parts
do a
man
little more
enjoys one
damage.
only. This was not the right
Make it a
answer,
little bloodier,
according to
you know?
Hera, and so she blinded him. Now, the story doesn't really illuminate anything except to underscore the fact that one half of the human race has no conception of what it is like to be the other half. There's a chasm of ignorance here, and that chasm of ignorance is not bridged when a man goes under the knife. He does not now know what it is like to be a woman. Rather, he knows what it is like to be a eunuch. And he also knows what it is like to be flattered and lied to by idiots, but he is not an inch closer to knowing what it is like to be a woman. Now, all of this affects everything. When you meet a young woman in church and you're chatting with her and wondering if you should ask her out, all of these things that I'm talking about are running in the background.
Play defense,
they're
build
running
an
in
army.
the background in your mind, and they are running in the background in her mind. And remember, they are running in the background differently. If he is showing romantic interest in her, then one of two things is going on. He is either trying to figure out how to get into bed with her dishonorably, or he's trying to figure out how to do it honorably. Those are your options. Because she knows that something like that is in the cards, and because she is the one who could get pregnant, she's wanting to know what kind of man he is, the dishonorable or the honorable one. He is focused on how attractive she is, and she is focused on how reliable he is. This is the point where critics will start yelling, as though I just said that a woman doesn't care about how attractive the man is. No, she absolutely cares about that also, but not the same way. The woman getting pregnant is a huge factor in all of this, and one of the things that our abortion cultures wanted to do is to erase that as a factor in order to put women on the same footing as the men. Birth control and abortion were intended to erase the clear and obvious difference I'm insisting on recognizing. But legal abortion does not really do anything of the kind. She is the one who gets the abortion and has to deal with the aftermath. A man can be the father of an aborted child and never even find out, in this life at any rate. He will find out at the day of judgment, which will be bad, but still different. I said earlier that the sexual differences between men and women are creational differences marred by sin. But to say that they are creational differences is the same thing as saying that God recognizes them as real differences. When men and women sin with those differences, God doesn't approve of it in either case, because it is sin, but he does recognize the sins as being different sins. We can see the difference easily out in the world of unbelievers. A man who's been with 100 women is considered by them as a quote-unquote player, while a woman who has been with 100 men is considered the club slut. From a biblical perspective, neither one is virtuous, obviously, but their sins are different. So we cannot overlook such obvious differences. A man in that position could be the father of 100 children. A woman could not be the mother of 100 children. And this is because the roles of father and mother are completely different roles.
Biology matters, and the world's propaganda machine notwithstanding, biology is not optional. And one of the things that is assigned to us in the creation order is that when it comes to the consequences of the sexual act, women are betting with far more money than the men are. This is because they are the ones who get pregnant. Am I belaboring the obvious? It is because we live in crazy times, and the obvious needs some belaboring. When we are forced to recognize such differences, which we have to because they are so glaring, we try to defend the egalitarian narrative by attributing the whole thing to society's quote-unquote double standards. The creation order itself is not egalitarian. Women are far more vulnerable to sexual consequences than men are. In response to this, one of the things that societies have done is to place additional safeguards around the women. This can be despised as establishing double standards, and it is certainly true that this protection for the women has been abused in a way that defends a double standard, where women are expected to stay pure and the men are expected to sow their wild oats. So I need to be very clear here. It is not a double standard to say that the sexual sins of men and women are obviously different. It is a double standard to say that the sins of the men are not sins. If you count on the boys sowing their wild oats, while at the same time keeping your daughters buttoned up tight, that is the kind of double standard that Scripture condemns. It is a sin to wink at the sin of boys and prohibit the girls from sinning. Quote, I will not punish your daughters when they commit whoredom, nor your spouses when they commit adultery. For themselves are separated with whores, and they sacrifice with harlots. Therefore the people that doth not understand shall fall. Hosea 4:14. And recall that time when Judah was going to have his daughter-in-law executed for quote-unquote playing the harlot, as evidenced by her pregnancy, when he was in fact the father of the child. So Scripture recognizes the sinfulness of both sexes in sexual sin and identifies it as sin. But this reality does not require us to pretend that the dislocations caused by these sins are the same. If a married man has a one-night stand with some other woman, the consequences for his marriage are severe. If a married woman has a one-night stand with some other man and conceives a child, the consequences are more severe. The fact that we have judges in our society who require men to pay child support for a child begotten by another man demonstrates how intent we are on trying to erase the differences between the sexes. It cannot work. So it is not a double standard to recognize that men and women sin differently and with different consequences. The prodigal son returns home, having been with multiple harlots, and is received with celebration. If it had been the prodigal daughter with a 2-year-old bastard, whose father was still off in a far country, she too would have been received home with gladness. The forgiveness can be the same, but the situations are still completely different, and the forgiveness in the latter circumstance would have to deal with far more. When it comes to sexual matters and your understanding of life between the sexes, you need to get every vestige of egalitarianism out of your system. You'll be surprised at how it affects your outlook when you approach another woman. Not only will it affect your outlook, it will affect the reception you are likely to get. But more on all that in my next. This has been long enough for one letter. Your uncle, Douglas.
Your based Uncle Douglas.
The reason this happened is because our evangelical centuries had become creatures of intellectual fashions of thought, instead of students of the Word and the world in the light of that Word. They had been educated by our institutions of higher respectable thought, which are, in effect, just hot tubs of intellectual fashion. Introduction. Suppose we were defending a city, and you and I and 2 other guys were sentries on the wall. You, of course, are a most reasonable fellow, as am I, so that's all good. But unbeknownst to us, the sentry on our left is really on the enemy's side, and the guy on the other side of us is the sweetest fellow ever, and cannot be prevailed upon to believe anything negative about anybody, which would include those who might be attacking our city. Between us girls, he really shouldn't have been allowed even to be a sentry, but he does bring the men coffee and cocoa, and he is a very pleasant companion in the midwatch. The 2 of us in the middle are known for our extremist views, by which is meant the fact that we can see the enemy approaching, and we have actually been discussing sending up another alarm about it. Once or twice before during the night, one of us walked over and rang the bell, and there was a great pother about it. The captain of the watch, who was a really nice guy also, just like the sentry to our right, was actually starting to get annoyed. It was quite something to behold. But he was not annoyed at the fact of enemies approaching, but rather with the fact that he had people in his guard who kept ringing bells in the middle of the night. So there we were, discussing ringing the bell yet again, because we were pretty sure, a euphemism for absolutely certain, that we saw them still coming. The sentry to the right was expostulating with us. Why this alarmism? Well, you said, it is because we are stationed by this alarm here, and our orders in the book say that we are supposed to ring it if enemies approach. With that, you point out into the gloaming, out to the mountains that surround our fair city, trying to get him to look. Well, I just don't interpret things in the same black and white way you do, the nice guy said, staring hard at the tower in the middle of the city. Not there, behind you, you reply. More extremism on display. Quote, and when Gale saw the people, he said to Zebul, Behold, there come people down from the top of the mountains. And Zebul said unto him, Thou seest the shadow of the mountains, as if they were men. And Gale spake again and said, See, there come people down by the middle of the land, and another company come along by the plain of Meonim. Then said Zebul unto him, Where is now thy mouth, wherewith thou saidst, Who is Abimelech, that we should serve him? Is not this the people that thou hast despised? Go out, I pray now, and fight with them. Judges 9:36-38. And then the sentry over on the left, the enemy plant, who'd been quiet up to this point, said to the sentry over on our right, Where is now thy mouth? You are going to die also, just like these two noisy buckets, the sheepdogs that wouldn't bark. How many reassurances need to be proven false before we stop believing those reassuring noises? How many times did faithful sentries have to get written up for ringing the bell before we realized that the wrong guys are in charge of this outfit? The established leadership of Big Eva has consistently, and for decades now, been warning the people of God about all the wrong dangers, about the things that are not the true threat. It is as though, in the months running up to Pearl Harbor, the people in charge of all
I'm
the
doing a good
defenses
job
there
of
have been warning the people
bleeding them
about
dry.
possible Peruvian invasion from the east.
10 of their
You got
guys have
what I
died
say?
now, and then I've only
So right
lost
on the
one.
threshold of a major
I lost
satanic
Hong Kong.
offensive
They lost
against
2
God's
guys.
design for human sexuality,
But I could
gender
care less
roles,
about their
the
property,
definition of
their
marriage,
lands,
and the
their
family.
their
What were our
forces.
approved voices telling us to guard against? Don't you
10 to
remember?
1.
That's right, our idolatry of the
Pretty
traditional
good.
family, or our making a
Pretty
fetish
good
out
for
of
me
heterosexuality,
so far.
or the fact that your congregation in
I really
northern
need to get my
Wisconsin
money
did
up,
not
though. It's
reflect the
killing
same
me.
demographic
I can't build
realities
I
that
can't
will
build
be
an
present
army until I
at
get
the
my money
general
up.
resurrection.
I got to make some
Which is
money
like telling a
moves.
church in the north
Like
of
the great
Finland
American
that didn't have
philosopher
enough
Cardi B
Congolese
once
members.
said,
That's right,
I'm
we
making
put up
money
with that
moves.
kind of nonsense for years from men like
And then after
Tim
that,
Keller,
I'm making
Russell
military
Moore,
moves.
David French, Matthew Hall et al., which is Latin for Andal Moeller. Beware of rising Peru in the east. But please note, returning to my first illustration, I'm not charging these men with being the sentry to the left, the guy who's actually on the side of the bad guys. No, they are good guys, who nevertheless still failed at their assigned job. They either refused to see the real threat themselves, French, or they saw and spoke about the real threat, but somehow kept hiring people who wouldn't see the real threat, Moeller. Quote, But if the watchmen see the sword come, and blow not the trumpet, and the people be not warned, if the sword come, and take any person from among them, he is taken away in his iniquity, but his blood will I require at the watchman's hand. Ezekiel 33:6. Now, is there such a thing as idolatry of traditional family? Of course there is. Fallen humans are capable of fashioning an idol out of pretty much anything. But was that the actual threat looming on our horizon? What was actually headed our way? What was headed our way was something like a cross between the central plaza of South Sodom and Bourbon Street, and yet we were being warned about the white picket fences of a small town in central Iowa. The reason this happened is because our evangelical sentries had become creatures of intellectual fashions of thought, instead of students of the Word and the world in the light of that Word. They had been educated by our institutions of higher respectable thought, which are, in effect, just hot tubs of intellectual fashion. But notice what Lewis warns us against. When we go along with the quote-unquote fashionable outcry of each generation, what happens then? Quote, The use of fashions in thought is to distract men from their real dangers. We direct the fashionable outcry of each generation against those vices of which it is in the least danger, and fix its approval on the virtue that is nearest the vice which we are trying to make endemic. The game is to have them all running around with fire extinguishers whenever there's a flood, and all crowding to that side of the boat which is already nearly gone under. C.S. Lewis, The Screwtape Letters. And this is exactly what has happened to our evangelical elites. What we should pray for. There's going to be a recoil to all this madness. Right now, I don't think that can be avoided. I suspect that we are going to come down to a choice between some kind of a red pill blow-up on the one hand and reformation and revival on the other. And because this is a big country, we even might get both.
There's two.
We might get attempts at secession,
Lost
we
two.
might get a constitutional crisis, and we might get shooting. Whatever it is, I predict a mess. Our interest as Christians first should be the advancement of the kingdom of God. That means that we should pray for peace. While it is true that God often uses turmoil to wake his people up, he nevertheless does not instruct us to pray for that turmoil. Quote, I exhort therefore that first of all supplications, prayers, intercessions, and giving of thanks be made for all men, for kings and for all that are in authority, that we may lead a quiet and peaceable life in all godliness and honesty. For this is good and acceptable in the sight of God, our Savior, who will have all men to be saved and to come unto the knowledge of the truth. 1 Timothy 2, 1 through 4. But here's the trick about those quote-unquote quiet and peaceable lives. On the one hand, you have to guard yourself against the temptation to go to sleep while on sentry duty. Francis Schaeffer warned us about how we could be bought off with quote-unquote personal peace and prosperity. So that is a danger. On the other hand, we have to guard ourselves against those hectoring voices who tell us that God wants all men to be saved, and so we must take special care not to pray the way he said. That would be, quote-unquote, making an idol out of, quote-unquote, quiet and peaceable lives. Now, we shouldn't make an idol out of anything, but that does not change the fact that the Apostle Paul taught us that because God wants all men to be saved, we should therefore pray for a quiet and peaceable life in the suburbs with green lawns everywhere you look. And if we get that, which we did, we should have used the opportunity the way God instructed us for the advancement of the kingdom of God. Because we refused, by which I mean we found ourselves with leaders who warned us more about the idolatry of green lawns than they did about the orgies and pride parades downtown, we therefore squandered the opportunity God instructed us to pray for, and which he mercifully gave to us. And that is why we are now having to do our current work of advancing the kingdom in the middle of clown world. If my suspicions are correct, it is also why in just a few years we are going to be working at advancing the kingdom in an angry red pill world. Neither scenario is pretty, but faithfulness calls for it. In our reaction video today, we are going to be interacting with Sam Harris, who has been interacting with Jordan Peterson. So this should be fun.
But speaking of apes with egos, some of the most compelling apes, two compelling apes I can think of is yourself and Jordan Peterson.
Thank you very much for that introduction.
And you've had fun conversation about religion that I watched most of, I believe. I'm not sure there was any...
we didn't solve anything.
If anything was ever solved. So is there something like a charitable summary you can give to the ideas of that you agree on and disagree with Jordan? Is there something maybe after that conversation that you've landed, or maybe as you both agreed on, is there some wisdom in the rubble, even imperfect, flawed ideas? Is there something that you can kind of pull out from those conversations, or is it a to be continued?
I mean, I think where we disagree. So he thinks that many of our traditional religious beliefs and frameworks are holding such a repository of human wisdom that we pull at that fabric at our peril, right? Like if you start just unraveling Christianity or any other traditional set of norms and beliefs, you may think you're just pulling out the unscientific bits, but you could be pulling a lot more to which everything you care about is attached.
So the thing to note here is that I think that what Peterson is saying, or to take Harris's summary of what Peterson is saying, I think that as a sociological observation, that's quite true. Our religious understanding and our moral and ethical understanding and our civilizational understanding and our cultural understanding of life, they're all woven together, and you can't just extricate one thing. So sociologically, I think Peterson is correct. If we pull out what Harris calls the unscientific bits, it's true that we might lose more than we thought we were going to lose.
Right, as a society. And my feeling is that there's so much downside to the unscientific bits, and it's so clear how we could have a 21st century rational conversation about the good stuff that we really can radically edit these traditions.
So I would want to say that the good stuff, as he calls it, the inheritance that we've received from Christendom, he wants to be able to take all those treasures and take them over into a 21st century understanding and have an adult conversation about all of these things. I think if we had an adult conversation, we would find out that the end result of atheism is nihilism and despair, and it is a repository of nothing.
We can take Jesus, in half his moods, and just find a great inspirational, Iron Age thought leader.
Let's quote him like Buddha, or quote him like Gandhi, or quote him like, we can quote Churchill or Jesus or Buddha or all these people. Inspirational, decontextualized thought that can fit on a Starbucks cup.
Just happened to get crucified, but he could be somewhat like the Beatitudes and the Golden Rule, which doesn't originate with him, but which he put quite beautifully. All of that's incredibly useful. It's no less useful than it was 2,000 years ago.
Useful according to whom? By what standard? There is no God. Why should I do unto others as I would have them do unto me? Wouldn't it be better to have them think that I'm doing unto others as I would have them do unto me, while I'm actually in it for number one, so that they do unto me what they would like me to do unto them, but I'm running a con? Why wouldn't that be a good way to go?
But we don't have to believe he was born of a virgin or coming back to raise the dead or any of that other stuff. And we can be honest about not believing those things, and we can be honest about the reasons why we don't believe those things. Because I on those fronts, I view the downside to be so obvious, and the fact that we have so many different competing dogmatisms on offer to be so non-functional. I mean, it's so divisive. It just has conflict built into it.
All those other opinions that differ with mine are divisive and contradictory. I know what, let's do things my way. Let me bring scientific materialism into the picture and have everyone bow down to that, whether or not you agree. Come on. His position, his worldview, is in the arena along with everything else. He can't pretend to be on this balcony overlooking the fray of worldviews and pretending to be above it all. I'm fond of saying that if there are 12 clowns in a circus ring cavorting about, you could get down there and start quoting Shakespeare or Darwin.
Seth in the chat says scientific materialism is so retarded.
That I think we can be far more and should be far more iconoclastic.
It always falls apart.
He wants to be, right?
Yeah, but iconoclasm is a fun activity, and once you start, it's hard to know when to stop. The atheistic, materialistic scientism is an idol that does not know how to defend itself.
Yeah.
An intelligent software
can't defend itself.
Can take it apart in 5 minutes.
It's like not possible.
Materialism collapses under its own weight. Watch in just a few minutes.
Now, none of this is to deny much of what he...
And they try to be so smart, and then they end up basically just going in circles.
Stories are very powerful, right? It's clearly
keep talking, they keep talking, so they're just slowly giving themselves more rope to hang themselves with.
ourselves and with one
That's kind of how it
another
always goes with these people.
about our lives that facilitates the best possible lives. And
The best possible lives, according to whom? By what standard? There is no God. All we are is meat, bones, and protoplasm. All we are is a chance collection of atoms. We are a concatenation of atoms tumbling down an endless corridor with no meaning or purpose. Maybe we should tell one another stories.
Speak
on the way
American?
to
Is
give
that a
ourselves
YouTube you
meaning.
want me to check out, or is that
part
someone in the
right?
YouTube
And
chat?
if you want some of those stories to
YouTube
sound like
Speak
myths,
American.
that might be part
American.
of it, right? But
Sort of scratch and sniff meaning. There is no meaning. There is no God. The universe has no purpose. It has no design. It has no intelligence. And yet, we
15 to
don't
3
like that,
is the
so we
count.
want to tell
He's
one
lost
another
15 units. I've
my
lost
argument
3
is that
units.
we never really need to deceive ourselves.
So it's a pretty
or
good
our
ratio.
children about
5 to
what
1
we
is
have
pretty
every
good.
reason to believe is true.
Usually you want to be like
in order
3
to
to
get
1 or
the good
4 to
stuff.
1 when you go to war.
Now, this is where I would agree with Harris, perhaps over against Peterson. In other words, I don't want to hang on to religion simply because it is pragmatically useful. You don't want to accept an account of ultimate reality simply because it helps keep a stable social order.
I don't know. I keep getting these people on
Christians
Twitch
should
and
want to
YouTube. They come in and they
pursue
type in these little
whatever the
6-letter
truth is,
codes.
whatever
I don't understand what it is or what it means.
That's what we
I'm just
should want
assuming
to
it's some
know.
kind of Fed
That's what
thing.
Harris is saying. But notice that Harris is saying truth above
Some
all
kind of
things.
robot thing.
But there is no truth. If his thoughts are simply the end result of what his brain chemicals would always do under those conditions and and at that temperature, if his thoughts, the things he's saying right now, are simply the epiphenomena, simply the brain gas of what's coming out of his head, then we have no reason for believing his thoughts to have any validity at all. And that would include his thought that he has a brain, that he is a person, that he is making sense of in any way. In other words,
He
this
destroyed
is a thing
himself
that
so
collapses
badly
under its
that
own weight. This is a worldview
Syria's going to be
that
coming for
cannot
him now.
give an account of itself. Sam Harris
Syria's
is saying,
coming.
despite there being no God,
Right.
I have meaning and I can know the truth about evolution, let's say, is if you shook up a bottle of pop and put it on the table here and it were fizzing over, his thoughts have the same mental authority that the bottle of pop does fizzing over. It's just a reaction. It's just something happening in the world. Truth? You don't look at the bottle of Mountain Dew I shook up and say, clearly a prophet. He speaks the truth.
In order to organize our lives well. You know, I certainly don't feel that I
Oh,
need
yeah,
to do
now
it
you want to
personally.
make peace, huh?
And if I
What
don't
are you
need to
gonna
do
give
it
me?
personally, why would I think
You
that
gonna give me all your
millions of other
money?
people need to do it personally? Right now, there is a
okay.
cynical counter argument, which is billions of other people.
You want to give me all your money,
don't have the
I'll
advantages that
call the
I've
dogs
had in my
off.
life. You know, the billions of other people are not as well educated. They haven't had the same opportunities. They need to be told that Jesus is going to solve all their problems after they die, say, or that everything happens for a reason, and if you just believe in the secret, if you just visualize what you want, you're going to get it. And it's like.
But notice, these people need to believe that everything happens for a reason. Harris believes that nothing happens for a reason.
Yeah.
Nothing happens for a reason. Yeah. And yet, he wants us to be able to act as though we have a reason for being. Now, I ask you, is that reasonable? All right, there are people who say, I need a foundation for believing that I have meaning. He says, no, there is no foundation. There is no meaning. And here's what you can do to create meaning for yourself. That's meaningless.
There's some measure.
Bitcoin
of
dropping
what I
like a lead
consider
balloon
to be
down to
odious
34K again.
That really is food.
I called 36 back in December when it was like 50.
And there is no
Yeah, I think it's gonna be
now.
going back and forth
And I don't know
between
if
30
Jordan
and
would agree
60
with that,
for
but
the next year or
much of what he
two.
says seems to suggest that he would agree with it.
And then it's either going to stable out. It might rise, but
And
I think it's
guess
going to
that's
stay
an
kind of
empirical
in
question.
there
And
for a
that's just
while.
that we don't know.
If it's
whether
down to 30, buy
it's
it because you know it's going back up.
Set of norms and a different set of stories.
That like 50, 60 mark is probably
Behave the way I would
long
hope they
term
would
the
behave
minimum.
and be aligned, more aligned than they are now.
To stop there, what he considers
I don't
to be
trust it.
odious
I don't buy it.
pablum.
I lost big time on
true that
Bitcoin.
what I'm
I'll pause this. I lost so big on Bitcoin. Like, my buddies in like 2011, 2012, and I was like when I was like super into conspiracies and like the Federal Reserve and stuff, and they were all, we were all like super Ron Paul libertarians, like 2011. And they're like, you gotta buy Bitcoin. You gotta buy Bitcoin. Buy Bitcoin, dude. Buy Bitcoin. So everyone, me and all my buddies, like, got some website, some, like, sketchy, like, I don't know. I don't even know what country it was. I want to say it was, like, Finland or Sweden or Denmark or something. Got some, like, sketchy website wallet. And I bought 10 or 12 Bitcoin. It was one of those two. And I forget what it was. It was, like, I probably paid like $100 or $200 for it. Don't hold me to these calculations, but it was something like I paid like $100 or $200 and I got like 10 or 12 Bitcoins. And I held on to it, and basically what happened was I just forgot about it. I was just like in college and I just partied and kind of forgot about it. And every once in a while I'd hear people talk about Bitcoin. I'm like, oh, cool, yeah, I have some of that. And then it was like 2012 or 2013, and I was just like so broke, like super broke, like literally about to be evicted because like I could not come up with rent money. And I was just that point where I'm like maxing out credit cards. I'm like taking out like payday loans. I'm like selling my stuff. And then like this thing I was just like, oh, I have those Bitcoins. So I'm thinking like, oh, I have like $200 of Bitcoins. Let me just go like extract that, And I remember like talking to my friend and being like, how do I like get this money back, And he was telling me like, don't do it. Don't do it. He's like, just hold on to it, dude. I was like, no, I just need my money back, man. Like, I don't trust it, This stuff is kind of silly. It's like some weird website anyways. I don't trust it. And so I went, and I think it was like $800. So I went, and I think I like quadrupled my money in like 2 years. So that too, like my buddy was telling me not to, and the fact that I had like forgotten about it too, I should have just kept forgetting about it, And yeah, so I went through the process, got like pulled out like $800, and I like paid rent with it, and I just was like, whatever, okay, like I just kind of like sat on like, oh well, I made some money off of it, and it helped me out, It's like I kind of viewing it as like clutch, man. I was so broke, like. Man, I just, that was so clutch that I made some money off of Bitcoin and like was able to pay that rent that one time. So I kind of like had this like dope, cool mentality, like pat myself on the back, like, yeah, I did a good job with that. Cool. And then, that was probably, 2013. And then, 2016 or 2017 when it just shot up, it just kept shooting up, and it's like, what would 10 or 12 Bitcoins be today? It's you said it's 32,000. That'd be $300,000. And if I would have sold it, if I would have just held on to that and sold at 60 like last year, I would have had $600,000. That was a yikes. That was a bad call, Sean. Yikes. Man, 600K. I could have had 600,000. Oh, man. So dumb. But also, like, I just didn't know what I was doing. Who knows if I would have even remembered my wallet. I had it written down on my phone. And I was like, I don't even know if I even have that phone anymore. Those phone notes. The little code thing. Yeah. So part of me is like, man, that's so dumb. Like, I should have just held on to that money. I wish I would have even forgotten about it, and then, maybe just remembered it in like 2017 or even just last year or something. But then also part of me is like, well, I made some money off it. I would have been evicted if I hadn't bought a little bit and made a little bit of money, The big thing though was I actually made a good amount of money last year on stocks. Right when Corona hit and all the airlines collapsed and everything shut down, I was like, you know what? Like, I gotta just buy some of this stock. Excuse me. So I bought a bunch of like Spirit Airlines and Delta Airlines, and I bought Starbucks fell, and I was like, dude, Starbucks is coming back. I used to work for Starbucks, you know. What was the other one I bought? What was the weird one I bought that was like good? Oh, and then the gas ones. The gas, like probably like 3 months after all the lockdowns, gas hit like an all-time low, and it was just like crazy. So I bought a bunch of like Exxon and BP and Chevron. I was just like, dude, there's no way this oil is going to stay this low, you know? So if you really just like, I think it's just better to do stocks where you're like, if you just see the trends, like all of a sudden, if something gets really low, like gas, you're like, dude, gas is like not going away, you know? And if it hits an all-time low, if it dips low, just buy it. You don't even have to know much about like the ins and outs. Just, ooh, gas is going low. Well, eventually it's going to do this. So buy it when it does this. And then when it does this, you know, and then after a while, just sell it, you know? So I made like a couple thousand last year total off of just like buying low, selling high during all the craziness. Not last year, 2020, 2 years ago. That's weird that that's like 2 years now. But yeah, like spring and summer of 2020, I actually made like a pretty good amount of money, like just buying and selling stocks. And like, I'm an idiot who doesn't know anything about stocks, you know? It was just like, oh, all these airlines are like not operating and their stock is plummeting. Might as well buy stock in it, you know? Might as well just like, and all I was doing was taking like my savings account and just putting it into stocks for a minute and then taking it out. It wasn't even like high rolling or like taking giant risks. It was just like, I might as well just like this money sitting here. I might as well just like have it sit here and then make money. And then I can just pull it out and put it back over here, you know? So I think I made, yeah, like at least 1,500, if not 2,000. And then I had to pay like 600 in taxes. So that was fun, you know? Man, I made all this money. I'm so smart. And then, you know, you just got to pay it all back to the government anyways. I think it was like 30%, 40% of it I had to pay back. So that was fun. But after that, I kind of stopped because I just didn't see as many like clear and obvious like oil's really low and obviously it's not going to stay that way kind of moments in the stock market. But you know, I feel like that's just kind of smarter than Bitcoin. I think Bitcoin's just too weird and unpredictable, and at least stocks are like kind of valuable. Like there's kind of some value to it. Like you're investing in a company that's actually like doing something that like actually has stakes in the game. It actually has employees and products and there's interconnectivity. You know, if you're investing in like an airline, you're almost also investing in like rubber and aluminum and metal and oil, because all the other industries like feed into the airline industry. So you kind of like when you're investing in something like that, you're kind of investing in like people and other businesses and resources. I just feel like there's like more like an actual foundation to it, buying like stocks, even though it also still is kind of like phony and fake and just nonsense numbers on a screen that don't make sense. Bitcoin to me is it's just this imaginary thing. Like it's literally just some imaginary number. And, you know, Elon Musk can just tweet something bad about it and all of a sudden you just lost like all your money. And when you're not investing in anything, you're just investing in like a number. You're investing in like people's confidence and trust in some imaginary thing, you know? So my big thing is I've been buying silver. I was like physical silver, and I have a little safe now, and I just keep buying little silver coins. Nothing big, nothing fancy, just little tiny coins. And I think that's just long-term the smartest thing. Like invest in something like tangible, you know? And if you're going to invest in stuff, invest in stocks. I feel like that's kind of the better, smarter play. But if you know how to manipulate the game, man, might as well make your money on that Bitcoin stuff or that, all that e-currency stuff. Sorry, I've been ignoring what you're saying. My Bitcoin cost $224. Yeah. That was so... half of me is like, oh, I'm so dumb. And half of me is just like, whatever about it. Like, I didn't know what I was doing anyways. I don't know. I kind of just feel, even though it's like not as dumb or as stupid, but I feel like it's like, if like I was like in like a gas station one day and they're like, oh, the Mega Lotto is an all-time high. And you're like thinking, you're like sitting there in line, you're like, you know what? Maybe I should buy a lottery ticket just in case. And so you go and you're like, you get to the counter and you're like, never mind. I know I'm not going to win. So you don't buy the lottery ticket. But then it turns out like a week later, you find out that the winning lottery ticket was like purchased that day at that gas station that you were at. And you're like, oh my gosh, that could have been me maybe. That's how I feel like, where I'm like, man, I should have just spent that $1 and got that ticket. I could have maybe potentially been a millionaire. And half of me is like, whatever. Like, whatever. I don't deserve it. I didn't know what I was doing. Like, I just didn't buy the ticket, so I don't deserve the money. So I'm like in that weird kind of mentality where I'm like, I don't really deserve to be like a Bitcoin 600,000 there or whatever. Bitcoin half millionaire. Because I didn't like earn it or deserve it or know what I was doing. But then part of me also is like, man, like I literally could be living on a dope homestead right now if I had just not been so selfish and stupid and short-sighted like 7 years ago. So yeah. I don't know what any of these are. ETH, I think that's Ethereum. LTC, no idea what that is. Litecoin or something. Litcoin. Lithuania coin. BCH is big. Oh, no, it's not. BTC is Bitcoin, right? Had more money than when he left. My brother runs Kraken BTC exchange. Yeah, Bearcoin. Yeah, I've heard that too. As a lot of people have, lost their password or whatever. $4 million Bitcoin lost to password losses. I say closer to 7 million. $7 million or 7 million Bitcoins? Because that would be like, what, billions, right? Hundreds of millions. Stocks are boomer Wall Street accounting fraud, yeah. The one thing about the stocks, though, is it's so interconnected and it's so tied to, like, boomers' retirement funds and stuff like that, that it can't fail. So, like, it's going to always dip and dive and do weird, shady stuff. But, like, at the end of the day, like, if it fails, everything fails, right? They've built up this giant house of cards. It's like, at this point, they cannot let that house of cards fall. Otherwise, it all falls. Maybe that's what they want to do, or that's what they're planning on doing. But I just feel like there's so many people invested in it and interconnected in it that, like, they can't let it fail. So it's kind of safe. Kind of a safe bet. I would never invest I would never put actual skin in the game, though. Don't get me wrong. But that's what I was like. I was just like, I have like I have $800 in a savings account. I might as well just like, what I was doing was like I'd buy $100 of Spirit Airlines and like $100 of Delta Airlines and then like $100 of Starbucks. I'm just like, whatever. Like, I'll just buy some of this, And it ended up being really smart. Like, just bought when the stocks were really low, and then, they just naturally rised, and they sold it when it got high, when it got back to like what it was supposed to be, or maybe a little higher, and just sold, and was like, I'm not gonna keep riding this roller coaster. I'm not crazy. I'm not greedy. Like, I'll just take my gains, my like 400, 800% gains on some of them, and just walk away, like, and just put it right back in my savings account, you know? So that was kind of my thing. And I'll just probably do that throughout my life whenever I like see those things happening. If I ever see some industry like drop that like does not deserve to drop, I'll just like move some of my savings over into that. But I think right now I went hard on Owen early on Bitcoin. Yeah. We're here. At the end of the day, it's all falling. Yeah. They're crashing the fiat currency. Yeah, yes and no. I don't know. I was thinking that like in the last 5 years, but now that Russia and China made their own fiat currency thing, I forget what it's called, but they made their own system now that basically like makes their own. They kind of got themselves off of the Federal Reserve, the dollar standard. The fact that they're like actually doing that makes me think that these countries are not having the end goal of going to Bitcoin, because like Russia would have just gone to Bitcoin, right? They wouldn't have made their like alternative fiat. They would have just made Bitcoin. They would have made Russia coin, right? Or like China coin. And then China too is like banning Bitcoin. So I think what's happening is like Russia and China are like really trying to pull themselves out of the dollar and the like the Western money system, the Western central banks. And to me, that's what's happened. I don't know. I don't have proof. I'm not some insider. I'm not even like super duper smart or well studied, like obviously. But I think China and Russia are trying to like pull out of the Western banking system right now, right? And that's why we're supposedly about to go to war with both of those countries, right? Oh, convenient timing. Like, oh, China's gonna quote unquote invade Taiwan and Russia's gonna quote unquote invade Ukraine. Looks like we need to like go to war with both those countries, right? It's like so conveniently timed as these countries are like pulling themselves out of the Western, you know, International Monetary Fund and central banking cartel systems. But the thing that I've noticed, and I've heard some people that I trust kind of say this, and Vox Day was kind of talking about it too, is like it would make much more sense if they're like pulling out, if they are trying to be like just get out of this Western banking system. It would make so much more sense for them to like do crypto. Like, why aren't they like just going full all in on Bitcoin or making their own cryptocurrency? But instead, they seem to be putting all their energy and resources into a fiat-based system. So that makes me think that bigger picture, like the fiat system thing, is still happening, and that there's still these fiat currency wars and stuff. And I think Bitcoin is kind of a scam, and it's kind of controlled by nefarious people at the end of the day. I don't think it's this like revolutionary freedom thing that all these libertarians think it is. But I think basically we're seeing fiat wars right now. We're seeing fiat behind the scenes cartel wars and jockeying for control and, you know, all the usual political theater nonsense and garbage and whatnot. But yeah, just seeing that like Russia and China, they didn't make a crypto economy alternative to the Western banking system. They made a fiat currency alternative to the banking system. So I think even they know that that's still got to be like the reality of the economy going forward, at least for like the next 50, 100 years. And I think too many people just won't do crypto. Like, yeah, like I live in Nashville, right? So like people in Nashville might just kind of go along with it. Like if their jobs are just like, we're only paying you in crypto. And then if you really want to go back to the fiat, you can find someone to convert it. And people in Nashville will be like, oh, okay, well, I need to keep making my money. I need to keep paying my mortgage. Okay, whatever you say, boss. You know, the same people that are like putting masks on their face to keep their jobs. You know, they're just like in debt and they're so addicted to their lifestyle that they'll just do whatever like their boss tells them. Okay, boss, whatever you say, boss. Make sure I get my promotion in 3 years and my 5% raise in 2 years. And I really need to keep paying my mortgage and buying my wife trinkets. Whatever you say, boss. Yeah, okay. So I think a lot of like city people will go along with it. But when you go out to like the country of Tennessee, like dudes are not using Bitcoin. They're not using Bitcoin. So even if they try to like force it on people, like people are just going to still trade in dollars, or they're just literally going to start bartering. Like, hey, I'm a plumber. I'll just come fix your plumbing, and like, I'll just like on this piece of paper, I'll like, you write me an IOU, and like, you know, we'll just kind of down the line someday we'll trade something. Or my friend does this and your friend does that, so we'll exchange some goods, some labor and some resources, and then they'll trade, and or people will just start using like silver and gold, you know. But people in the country are not doing crypto. I think they know it. We know it, they know it, everyone knows it. Like, you can get like the totally converged, cucked out liberal, leftist, feminist, radical, crazy, you know, those in rebellion against God in the cities, people to go along with this like crypto stuff. If you basically just say like, we're going to take away your food and your pornos. We're going to take away your Pepsi and your pornos. And unless you start using crypto, and I think all these people will be like, oh, okay, yeah, sure, whatever. Give me the card. I'll do that. And I think everyone in the country, they're going to be like, we're going to do really bad stuff to you. And people in the country be like, I don't care. You can try. Nuh-uh, not here, bro. So I think there's just too many of those people out there for them to really, truly take away the fiat currency. So I think it's going to be this weird mixture of both. Long, rambling story short. I think what they're trying to do is basically like turn the cities into like techno, crypto hellholes. And then people in the country, they're just going to keep kind of slowly trying to like control them with the usual manipulation that kind of works, but really doesn't at the end of the day. Kind of leave them alone, kind of keep pretending like they're free, and they live in a free country, and their vote matters, and their taxes are helping fight off terrorists, and you know, the government takes care of you if there's a drought, farmers, don't worry. Like, the government's here for you. I think they can still kind of use some of these like little tactics they use to kind of control the country population, but just taking away their money and being like, you have to use this like credit, this like card or this like computer screen, people are not going to do it. They're just like not going to do it. So I think there's going to be two kind of like in the future, basically like two worlds in America, like the crypto, techno, like hellholes of the city, and then just kind of like the basically like a free range farm. Like, you're going to have your coop chickens. You're going to have your goats in the pen that are like really well controlled and taken care of and monitored and fully vaccinated, and you know, there's security cameras watching them at all times, and they have to eat what the farmer gives, what the human livestock farmer gives them to eat, or else, you know, and they get cattle prodded if they act out. And then I think over here, like in the country, there's going to be free range chickens where the farmer's like, you know what? You guys can just go live out there in the country. Just make sure you come back at night, pay your taxes, and don't rebel. Don't overthrow the system. Don't run away. You know, just go out in the field. Have fun. Enjoy yourself out there. You know, prairie chickens, just go out there. Just make sure every once in a while you come back home, lay your eggs, pay your taxes, don't rebel, don't run away, and we'll just leave you alone out there. And I think that's kind of the future of America, is city technology hellhole that's going to be like crypto stuff and Mark of the Beast and security cameras on every corner, and your whole life is monitored. And then I think there's going to be this like basically like a secondary country outside of cities that's just like, they'll kind of leave everyone alone and make them like pretend like they have freedom and give them the illusion of like having land rights and stuff, but really they're just kind of like left alone to be producers, and then slowly and secretly and sneakily have their resources and their labor stolen from them while they have the illusion of being free. You know, they don't live in the hellhole cities. We live in the country where we're free. And then the people in control are like, yeah, you're free. Yeah. Yeah, you're free. Just turn the other way when we come to take your eggs, and don't rebel, and don't leave the farm. And yeah, you're totally free. That water trough is totally yours. You own that. You totally own that. This land is your land. We'll let you vote for president. It's going to be one of two people that we've totally hand selected and have blackmail over. But yeah, you could totally vote for president. Free range chickens. So I think that's kind of what they're setting up. Like, I don't think they're going to push one or the other. I don't think they can push the city stuff that they're pushing in the cities on people in the country. And I don't think they're going to let like the freedom that people in the country are going to want and demand going forward in the cities. The people in the cities like are going to need to be provided for and protected, overwatched and overtaxed and over manicured, over pleasured, like over controlled. Everything's going to need to be super easy for them, super convenient for them, you know. And the people in the country are going to start growing more like, leave me alone. And the controllers will be like giving them the illusion that they're leaving them alone, you know. So that's my little rant. That's my rant about cryptocurrency and the future of it. I think there's going to kind of be two forms of like government and two forms of currency going forward. There's like the city and then there's like the country. Yeah, USD is worthless though. It's pretty worthless. Money laundering Bitcoin in 2016. Hunter, Heinz Kerry, Devin Archer, Joe Biden. Yeah. Country mice need to starve the city mice out now while they still can. Boycott food to the cities or they will force UN crypto on them. Yeah. Techno-sodomy is still sodomy. Yeah. Dropped off a rooster at the farm today. It got some talking to by the other roosters and had to fight its way into the pecking order. Yeah. Gotta earn your place. If it doesn't figure it out, rooster be chicken dinner. Yeah. Rewrite Animal Farm 2022. Yeah. Yeah. Super soy cities. Yeah. Yeah. I just, you know, I'm a city boy. I'm from California. I just know how people act and like what they think, and I can just see the clear contrast, the clear difference. And then even moving to Nashville, like I've seen it here too. It's obviously less extreme than like San Diego and Los Angeles, but Nashville's still the same way. Everyone's too comfortable. Everyone's in their fancy houses and they're taking their takeout food and they're putting their masks on because they have to go to the grocery store. You know, or else, like, they're going to go hungry. You know, oh, I'm not going to be able to pay my mortgage if I don't wear my mask and go to work. Oh, I got to get a vaccine so I don't get fired. It's totally, like, I mean, it's not as horribly bad. It might be close, but it's just not as publicly. It's not on full display as bad as, like, California city liberals. But, I mean, drive 30 minutes outside the city, and that does not happen. You know, people like churches don't close, like people do not wear masks, like the police are like, we want our people to have guns. We want our citizens to have guns. Like, it's just so, I don't know, you can just tell, like, and then I go out there and I feel so like, even me who's pretty aware of how like insane the cities are, and I'm pretty rebellious against like the agendas they push for like the city mice, the mouse utopia mice. I'm pretty aware what's going on and kind of don't get sucked into some of the traps. But even still, like I'll go out to like the country and like I definitely stick out like a sore thumb. You know, it's kind of funny. It's pretty funny. I am going to do a stream this year about Mouse Utopia and talk about all this, the Mouse Utopia experience, and basically the same thing, the UN agenda to force everyone, or try to force as many people as they can into cities so that they can do this. They can easily harvest and make the human farming that much easier. But they can't force it. If they force all the mice into Mouse Utopia, like if you take a bunch of country mice and you force them into Mouse Utopia, I think too many of them will rebel. So I think the plan is to get as many people into the cities as possible and make it an easy goat pen to control, to farm the humans, you know? But you can't force too many in there, especially if there's a lot that don't want to be in there. I think what they're doing is they're making it harder and harder to live in the country, and they're making it more desirable to live in the city so that more people are choosing to live in the cities more people are choosing to like move from the country to the cities. But they're never going to be able to do the whole thing. So I think at the end of the day, they're going to have two systems, and they're going to want everyone to be in the cities. They're going to try to push for people to be in the cities. But when it comes down to it, there's just too many people that don't want to be in Mouse Utopia. And so those people that don't want to, they're going to find a way to let them not. They're going to find a way to like let those people have the illusion that they are free. You know, oh, all those humans in the Mouse Utopia, look at how unfree they are. Look how crazy they are in the cities. But it's just going to be like a more elaborate container, a more elaborate trap for the country mice, you know. The city mice are going to be like blatantly just like slaves in a box. And then the country mice, the quote-unquote free mice in the country, they're still trapped and enslaved and being milked, but it's just the illusion's going to be there for them to believe that they're free when they're not. And then the people in the box are like, they're like, why would I want to be free? I don't want to go work hard in the country. I don't want to go like take the risk of living on my own like a country mouse. I'm comfortable here in my box. I'm comfortable here in the Mouse Utopia. I like it here. I have, look at all the food. There's piles of food everywhere. Look, there's sex everywhere. I can get sex everywhere. I can be whatever I want in the metaverse. Like, I can just I can do whatever drugs I want. It's great. I can feel great all the time. And so I think a lot of people are going to start choosing, they have been, I think they're going to continue to start choosing to live in the box, in the Mouse Utopia city boxes. But I think just too many, not like, maybe like tens of millions, maybe 100 million in America will choose not. They're like, no, we're not going to the box. We're not going into the Mouse Utopia. So they're going to be country mice, and they're going to be allowed to be country mice so long as they keep farming and raising the cattle and building stuff and being productive and like basically having their labor like taken from them. They're going to be given the illusion of freedom. You're free. You're not in a box like all those Mouse Utopia mice, those city mice. You're free. You're a country mouse. You're free. You own your own land and your own labor. Wink, 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 wink. Pay your taxes, grow the food, build the stuff. And so I think that's kind of our futures. I think we're going to start seeing this stark contrast between city mice and country mice. And of course, I'm talking about human beings. Like I'm talking about me and you. I'm talking about people, human beings, human mice. City folk and country folk. And I think there's just going to start being like a parallel economy. There's going to be two groups of human beings, like basically two nations. There's going to be two economies, two nations, two sets of laws, two like types of people. It's just like this big divide I think is going to start growing in this country between city and country. And I don't know. That's kind of my big theory on it. That's just my theory. Fancy pants and lollipop apps. Jefferson City, Tennessee. No. No. Is that where Mr. Ignoramus lives? No, he's Johnston City. Let me see where that sounds familiar. Yeah, Ignoramus is in Johnston City, which is very far east. I think he's like 5 or 6 hours away from me. Johnson City, Tennessee that's also like 4 hours away from me. Yeah, Johnson City is like way past Knoxville. Oh, Jefferson City. Yeah, so Johnson City is where Ignoramus says. Jefferson City, Tennessee is almost the same. Yeah, it's like 3 hours away past Knoxville. Yeah, it's like 3 hours east. The crazy thing about Tennessee is like it's such a weird shaped state where like, you know, north to south is like 1 hour. 1 hour drive. Like you go from Kentucky to Alabama in like an hour, hour and a half. But if you want to go from like Memphis to Knoxville, it's like 6 hours. Like the length is so ridiculously long. And then you have to go up hills and mountains, so it makes the drive a little longer. But north to south, it's really not that far. So like Jefferson City, Tennessee, like I'm actually probably closer to Birmingham, Alabama, you know? Like I'm closer to Alabama, like Huntsville for sure is only like an hour and a half away. But yeah, it's like I might as well drive to Birmingham, Alabama. Let me see if that's right. Jefferson City's 3.5 hours away. And then, you know, driving halfway down the state of Alabama is 2 hours and 40 minutes. So it'd be quicker for me to drive down to the middle of the state of Alabama. It'd be a quicker drive for me than going to out east, out to Jefferson City, Tennessee. You know, that's how wild and weird the shape of Tennessee is. It's deceiving. It's kind of like, you know how California is too, where like people from the outside are like, oh, like if you're like, oh, I used to tell people like, yeah, I'm in San Diego, and people be like, oh, is that like, are you close to San Francisco? Oh, are you close to like Monterey? And it's like, no, it's like 8 hours away. You know, no, like it would be like an 8-10 hour drive, and it would just confuse people that aren't from California because they're like, what? But it's like the same state, like. And I'm like, yeah, it's the same state, but California is like enormous. You know, you don't picture how long of a drive it is from the south to the north. And then too, it's like, you know, from San Diego to San Francisco, it would take me like 8-9 hours. You know, if I just drove straight too, that's like without stops. 8 hours, 9 hour drive. But if I wanted to go over to like Phoenix, Arizona, which is like the middle of the state of Arizona, I think it's like a 4 hour drive. 5 hour drive, you know. So like I could go halfway across, I could go all the way through California, east to west, you know, or west to east, and then halfway through the next state over, and that drive would be shorter than me just driving to San Francisco, California. So it's just really weird how that works out to me. It's kind of silly. Country mice should poison the food. The Bolshevik mice get, yeah. Heath Schuler in Knoxville. Go Tennessee River Cats, yeah. Bay Area to LA is 5 hours? That doesn't seem right. Are you sure about that? I remember I've done 2 road trips. I did 2 road trips to San Francisco, and I remember them taking like 8 hours, 9 hours. I did one from LA to Humboldt County, which Humboldt is another like, 2 or 3 hours north of San Francisco. And I think that drive was like 10 hours or 11 hours. I made it in 4 going 95 miles an hour, yeah. I remember like LA to Humboldt, it took me the whole day. I left in the morning and it took, like I didn't get there until like night. It was like a 10, 11 hour drive. And I want to say that I stopped in San Francisco after like 7 hours. And then one time I drove from San Diego to San Francisco, and I think I remember it taking like 8 or 9 hours. But I could be wrong. I could be totally wrong. I was also a big stoner pothead, and I think I was smoking on that trip as well. So, grain of salt, you know. LA to Humboldt. Holy crap, yeah. I'm going to end this stream and start a new one in a little bit. I'm going to take a little break. Because I'm going to read my Bible, do some push-ups, and go to the bathroom. And I'll be back in a little bit. I got to get a little bit of a workout in. I got to, read my Bible for the night. Potty break.